during the webinar, and afterwards, when we start the Q&A, there is a button below. So we will be reviewing those questions, and we look forward to hearing from you. So now about our agenda. Sorry, second, trying to go to the.
For some reason, okay. Oh, okay, sorry.
No problem.
Apologies.
Okay, it's all good. So these are our speakers for today. With me in the same room is Ranveig Guillarneau. She's the Chief Science Officer at ICR. And she has been working together with the Landox Code, who have been developing this methodology. And from Landox Code, we have today Suna Auskelsdottir. She is a Peatland expert, and she has been working on the methodology for a long time. So she will be your subject matter expert. And we also have with us today Bryndís Marteinsdottir. She is the Director of Sustainable Land Use at Land and Forest Iceland as well. And she will be here if you have any questions for her, she can answer those. So welcome to our speakers and our agenda for today. Like I said, we will have 60 minutes. At the beginning, we will be talking about the methodology approval process at the ICR. Ranveig will explain a little bit about what the process entails. We also want to remind you this webinar is happening in the context of a public consultation. So the public consultation goes for 1 month. So after this webinar, you can submit your comments, which will be reviewed and sent to the VVP at the end. And then Sunna will present the methodology of this MYRKOL Peatland methodology, some of the key benefits and applications of it. And at the end, we will have our Q&A. So without further ado, I give it over to Ranveig.
Thank you, Alondra. So I'm going to start by giving you just a brief introduction into ICR as a carbon registry, and then also a brief introduction to our methodology development process before Sunna takes over. So ICR is a carbon registry. We have around 112 local and international carbon projects. 44 of them are under development, 44 under validation, and 24 have been validated. Through ICR, buyers can invest in carbon credits that meet international standard and requirement. The heart of ICR is the ISO 14064 standard, which is a standard for carbon project at the production or at the development level. But those of you who are maybe familiar with the ISO 14064 you may know that it is designed to be applicable to all kinds of carbon projects. That means like technologically based, nature-based, avoidance, reduction, and removal. So this means that it needs some additional requirements, and therefore we have added the ICR requirements. Just a brief overview of these additional requirements to the ICR requirements is that they must demonstrate multi-levels of additionality. ICR has its own crediting period, like avoidance reduction project. They have a 10-year crediting period, which can be renewed twice. And then removal projects, they have like a 15-year crediting period with the renewable, which can be renewed. All projects must identify possible leakage. A FOLU and carbon dioxide removal project, they must contribute to a non-permanence buffer or have an insurance coverage. All projects, they must meet like environmental and socio-economic safeguards. They must make a risk assessment, for example, non-permanence, financial risk assessment, regulatory risk assessment, and social. And of course, have a detailed monitoring plan and transparent monitoring. Registered project cannot issue under multiple registry, which means no double counting. And ICR allows for grouped and bundled projects, which means that ICR allows multiple project activity under one grouped framework. So we are CROA accredited, and we are in partnership with KITA. KITA is a carbon insurance company, which can both help with the assessment, risk assessment, for example, of projects, for example, a climatic risk or political risk. To give an example, afforestation project, for example, in Scandinavia or in the northern part of the world, are often identified with less risk of fire risk because related to the climate, and also, at least for now, the political situation is rather stable in the Nordic part of the world. So that would be labeled low risk. And also KITA evaluates the buffer pool of the project that need to make such an assessment. We are also in partnership with B0. B0 is like an extra, so every project, of course, needs registered in ICR, needs to be validated and verified through an independent third party or a VVB, validation verification body. But project proponents registered with ICR, they can additionally have an even better, even extra, if you can say so, quality standard by getting a B0 rating. So just to explain why B0 additionally to a VVB assessment, that is, I like to take the example of two cars. You have a Volvo and a Mercedes-Benz, for example. These two car types are good enough to be allowed on the streets, but maybe B0 could then rate which car is better. As you can also see, like on the picture on the screen, you can see a screenshot from all our projects that are registered within ICR. So we do not differentiate between projects. We allow all projects removal, avoidance, reduction, and all projects have their own like space within our platform where project can upload and tell their story, upload pictures from field measurement, news, videos, and so on. And this is, of course, open to all to see. And all information about the project are publicly available, such as project design descriptions, monitoring report, review report from validation verification bodies, how much credits are pending, are active or retired, and so forth. And just a short introduction of our team. At the moment, we are a team of 8 people. So we have Guðmundur Sigbergsson, which is our founder and CEO. Alondra, which you have already met and is moderating this panel. She is Chief Marketing Officer. We have Robert Huldarsson, he's our lead developer. Björn Halldór Helgason, who is our Chief Product Officer. Ole Torfason, Chief Operating Officer, Þórður Ágústsson, our Chief Technology Officer, and Ria Antil, who is our Project Review Specialist. Yes, sorry. This is but ICR is not just about a carbon, registering a carbon project with the aim of generating high quality carbon credits. We also have an ICR methodology approval process. We do not develop our own methodologies, meaning that project or methodology developers, they can come to ICR and develop their methodology through the ICR platform and get it validated and verified, and then eventually approved as an approved methodology. This we do to support climate innovation. All methodologies are welcome. So we think that all methodologies are equally important: removal, avoidance, reduction. We need everything to tackle climate change at the moment. So, and our idea behind this is just to help climate innovation scale up. and again, just like with the carbon project, the heart of the methodology approval process is the ISO 14064-2 and the additional ICR requirement. And of course, all methodologies needs to undergo validation and verification by VVB. And this is just to show you a brief overview of the process. So if a methodology developers, they can, get in contact with us. Well, the first thing that they need to do is that they need to write a concept note. And we have specific templates for that, which are actually all available at the moment and have always been on our platform under the ICR program. The concept note is just the general description of the methodology. Then the concept note is sent to ICR, where it undergoes a review and gets the methodology developers get a feedback from us, and there we check if the methodology is in line with the ISO 14064-2 and the ICR requirement, and maybe we have some further suggestion, and then the methodology developers gets a review from us, and either they can continue to the next step, which is the methodology description phase, or they may need to do some adjustment before the concept note is accepted. And even some ideas, if we feel that they are not in line with our requirements and the ISO standard, then they can even get rejected. Yes, so and then after we move, the concept note has been accepted, the methodology description phase goes on. From there, the project with methodology developers, they can either send their methodology description document straight to a validation verification body, and there the process goes on. And after the methodology has been validated, it needs to go into public consultation for 30 days. Or the methodology developer can do the methodology description phase and go straight into public consultation, get some comment from there, and this is what we're doing now, and then take the comments and then send them to a VVP and then get it validated. And this is the process that we are doing today. But it's not enough just to do the concept note and the methodology description note. One also needs to have a project in place or that will take place that applies the methodology. Because otherwise, project methodology developers, they could be writing a methodology just like as a desk study, and then maybe if someone later on would like to use the methodology, it maybe doesn't really work in the field. So basically, after the methodology has gone through all the phases I just described, a project needs to be in place to apply the methodology, which is then again validated by the VVB. And if the VVB decides or is the verdict that the methodology and the project are aligned, then the methodology can be approved. And just a brief overview of what the methodology description template looks like. As you can see, the methodology needs to be quite detailed and does need the same core principles as like a carbon project. It needs to define applicability condition, the baseline scenario, boundary additionality, quantification of greenhouse gas emission mitigation, and so forth. And just for you later on after this webinar, if you go to our ICR platform and you choose ICR program, from under there, you choose methodology development, and under development, then you will see the list of methodology lists under ICR. And at the moment, we have 9 methodology in development. And there you will find the MYRKOL methodology, M-ICR0007. And there you can read everything about it and also post your comments to take part in the public consultation. And on that note, I would like to say to thank you for your attention. Thank you.
So now, yeah, we move on to Zoom.
Okay, so I started sharing my screen, but I didn't hear Alondra, what Alondra said in the...
I was...
And not now.
Sorry, I was just handing it over to you and checking if you were ready to share your screen. So...
Okay. So you can hear me? Yes, okay. So Alondra already introduced me. My name is Unn Ásgeirsdóttir and I work from Land and Forest Iceland. And I am going to introduce the MYRKOL methodology, which is a methodology for estimating reductions of greenhouse gas emissions with rewetting of peatlands, and where we use water level as a proxy for the quantification. I will begin with a little bit of background and context, then address the goal of this methodology, rationale, applicability, and talk a little bit about the monitoring plan, and end with a little bit of insight into the emission reduction calculations. And of course, after that, we will have questions, hopefully many questions. A little bit of background about Iceland. Icelandic peatlands cover about 9,000 square kilometers of the island, or about 20% of the vegetated surface of the island. Our peatlands are mostly sloping fens and have considerable mineral content because of the volcanic nature of the island and ongoing and historic erosion of the dryland soils. Our peatlands are dominated by vascular plants. We do not have those like sphagnum dominated peatlands as our neighboring countries because of our volcanic nature. And our peatlands are a very important habitat for birds. They're especially important for waders in the northern hemisphere, which come here each summer and breed. Peatland drainage was heavily subsidized for a period of half a century, resulting in around about half of our peatlands are impacted by drainage, 70% of lowland peatlands and up to 90% in some areas, for example, in the south. And you can see it on the map. All the orange colored areas are drained peatlands. Of those drained areas, only a small part is in intense agricultural use or use that requires it to be drained, resulting in large areas or relatively recently drained peatlands with low degradation status, which are quite easily restored to former glory. So we have a lot of areas like this, where you have a whole valley maybe, with drained area that is not in any use. Might have been drained, and then the farmsteads maybe left just a few years later. We are a small population, a big land, and emissions from drained peatlands are the single largest contributor of anthropogenic emissions in Iceland. So there is it's understandable that peatland rewetting has played a major role in Iceland climate action plans and strategies since 2016. And the government has set quite high targets to rewet 5,300 hectares by 2026, so next year, and 50,600 hectares by 2030. Previous rewetting targets have not been met, and we are also quite far behind on our current targets. So this methodology is an attempt to make rewetting peatlands a more appealing option for landowners and land managers, because most of our land is privately owned. And a little bit of a wider context, we are experiencing a global climate crisis, but just as serious is the global biodiversity crisis and the collapse of ecosystems worldwide. And it is very important to address those crises holistically and trying to fix it all at once. It's also very important to keep the carbon in the long-term storage of soil and not to lose it up to the atmosphere where peatland rewetting is a win-win action, as it additionally improves biodiversity, water storage, minimizing flood risk and such, and also water filtration. For example, it's a known solution to filtrate chemicals out of maybe sewage and stuff like that by making the water go through peatlands. And so this methodology, the goal with it is to make a simple, clear, and practical methodology. A methodology that is applicable to Icelandic conditions, but can also be used globally. A methodology that is realistic and scientifically sound. A methodology that is site-specific. And for example, here in Iceland, drained peatlands are in a very variable conditions. So somehow we have to address it, both the variable conditions and also a variable success of rewetting. And we want to use the best available data. And for us here in Iceland, we have quite a lot of data set where we have been measuring water level simultaneously with CO2 emissions. Peatland conditions is very dependent on a good hydrology status, and water level is very closely represents hydrology. Restoration of peatland hydrology is essential for the recovery of its ecosystem functions and communities. So it's kind of the start. You have to put the plug in the drainage, so all the functions such as carbon storage, water balancing can start to recover, as well as the communities that depend on those areas, such as birds, vegetation, and small animals. Water level, depth, and CO2 emissions have a globally robust relationship in variable conditions. Yeah, and as I previously said, considerable data is available from measurements in Iceland in various locations during a long period. And water level is easily measured compared to most other variables. For example, doing the flux measurements and carbon losses in soil measurements, those are quite more work and more complicated. And continuing with the rationale, CO2 plays a major role in peatland greenhouse gas balance, the biggest role, and increase in methane emissions with raising the ground level is leveled out with a decrease in N2O emissions and a decrease in methane emissions from the ditches and indirect emissions from waterborne carbon. So carbon that we lose with the water in the ditches. And the vegetation photosynthesis capability does not change with restoration. So we end with this, the difference in CO2 emissions before and after rewetting. And applicability. This methodology is applicable to grasslands on organic soils, drained, vegetated, and unforested peatlands. Very much like we see on the picture there. It's very common here. Drained peatlands that have maybe only been used for grazing or such. The project involves drained peatland for land use change. Post-rewetting land use must be limited to land use negligibly affecting greenhouse gas balance or less than 5%. So you can't do something that completely changes the greenhouse gas balance. The project site must not negatively affect land use outside the project area, and nitrogen fertilizer cannot be used during the baseline and project periods. And then we are at the monitoring plan, which things you have to monitor. And in the beginning, a thorough study site must be conducted. And if the site meets the applicability conditions, then the area is stratified into homogeneous units according to relevant habitat type or vegetation classification system to represent condition variability within the site. Because it's very common, for example, close to the ditches, the conditions are much more drier, and there is maybe dryland vegetation, majority of dryland vegetation, but maybe in the middle or in some areas, there is much less drainage effect. And it's important to map this. And the mapping unit is 3,000 square meters, but if strongly deviant, 1,000 square meters. And this can, for example, be if you have like here in Iceland, like a dryland, small dryland hill, we often see that, or maybe a little patch of forest, then you have to map it out. And it's also really important to do the mapping when vegetation is the most easily identified. So usually that is in late summer. And this has to be done by experts. Then water level measurement points are installed by experts also to represent each strata. At least 1 point for each strata, but never less than 2 for each 10 hectares. And all this has to be done by peatland experts or vegetation experts or ecosystem experts. The water level is monitored for at least 2 years for the baseline period before rewetting, because all the measurements of the gains of the project are based on the baseline period. And it's continuously monitored through the whole project period. And by measuring the water level during the whole period also guarantees that the rewetting is successful, because as soon as you see some strange measurements in the water level, you know that maybe the implementation of the rewetting was not very successful. Then you have to do something to fix it, so you can respond very quickly. All data collected must be safely archived and backed up in an electronic format. And of course, very importantly, the peatland shall be rewetted according to the best practice and expert advice in each case, because rewetting is not a one way fits all. You always have to work with conditions at each site, and you have to do it quite thoroughly so to get the best results. And it should be scheduled when impact on ecosystem is minimal. For example, not in bird breeding season. And in some examples, you might have to think about maybe if there's a river close by of the freshwater ecosystem, is there spawning? When is the spawning taking place? But all this is quite well outlined in the principles and standards for the practice of ecological restoration, which the project should be managed according to. And then for the calculation of the reductions, after the baseline period, the sum of the baseline average water level in each strata, and of course relative to the size of each strata, is multiplied by relevant water level and emission correlation factor. So then you have the baseline number, and then in every project year after that, you calculate the sum of the average water level each year of the project period in each strata, again, of course, relative to the size of each strata, multiplied by relevant water level and emission correlation factors. And the size and outlines and mapping of the strata stays the same through the whole baseline period and the project period. And then it's quite simple. The gains or the emission reductions are simply the difference of A and B each year. A, the baseline number that is constant, and the B, the project number that changes every year. So in short, the calculation is based on the rise in water level after rewetting in relation to relative data on CO2 emissions and water level correlations. Yes, and then I say just thank you from this beautiful area Framengjar in Mývatnssveit, a Ramsar site.
Thank you very much, Suna, for your presentation. It was very clear, and I think the pictures were a great addition to actually see what is happening on the field. It gives people a clear idea, and it makes it feel more close to the actual projects. I wanted to remind everyone that you can submit your questions in the bottom of your screen. There is an icon with an interrogation mark, and it says Q&A. So you're more than welcome to submit questions. In the meantime, I have two questions that I would like to present. Feel free to respond either Suna or Ranveig. The first one is, how soon from the beginning of the project can carbon credits be issued?
So, I can take that. So as Suna mentioned in her presentation, so one has the 2-year baseline period, but after that, because rewetting of peatland is considered like an avoidance project, then when the reduction has been quantified by double checking the water table, then these credits are active, or they are like, how do you say, alive? So these are not like pending credits, like, for example, if one has to wait for the tree to grow or for the carbon to be sequestered in the soil for a number of years.
Wonderful. Thank you for that answer, Ranveig. The next question has to do with the duration of the project. So for how many years can I get the carbon credits?
Sorry, can you repeat that question?
For how many years can I get carbon credits?
Yeah, so it depends on the project, as I mentioned in the beginning. So like avoidance project, they have an initial period of 10 years, and that can be renewed twice.
Okay, great. And there's another question about the land ownership. So if someone is a landowner and they would like to start a peatland project, what is the process to get it started?
Sunna, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, as I understand that they would need a project manager, and but they could contact us and we could guide them. But we are now starting this spring. We are starting the two first like pilot projects where we are going to use this methodology for the first time.
Can you tell us a little bit more about these pilot projects, if you can?
Yeah, we are like really short, just beginning. And those are areas, one area here in the southwest and one is in the north, and they are both just very typical abandoned peatlands that we see here in Iceland that were drained somewhere in this maybe 70s and were never really used for maybe for some grazing for some period of time, but are now completely abandoned. And of course, very exciting. One is in a Ramsar site in Grunafjörður. So it's very fruitful bird life there that will probably be even better when we have restored the area. But I don't know the area in the north as well. And the one, it's quite exciting because it's in the complete opposite sides of the island. In the north and in the northeast and in the southwest, and one is very close to the sea, the other one is like a very typical sloping fen and one is not very heavily drained, the water level is still quite high, and the other one is quite heavily drained. Yeah.
Okay. All right, very exciting for these projects to get them started and be the first ones to use the methodology. In terms of the public consultation, we have received already one comment. The process, it takes place on our website. So like Ranveig showed in her slide, you can go there, you can read all the methodology documentation, and then you will have a form where you can submit your comments, and they can be in any areas. If you have a question, if you are concerned about certain areas, the public consultation will be open for a few more days. Do you remember exactly the date? It's mid-March.
Yes, it's mid-March. It's
the 15th, if I'm not mistaken.
15th or 17th, I don't remember.
So you still have a few days to submit those projects. In regards of the comments that we have received, there is one that has to do with the risk assessment for permanence. So are the water levels measured every year?
Yes.
And can you tell us a little bit more about like how that process takes place over time?
The water level measurements. I'm not sure if you're thinking of the practicality of the measurements themselves, but it's very important to measure the water level, especially during the period where you see the most like variability. So here in Iceland, we often see water levels during the winter time very high, or even it's just frozen, so we can't even measure it. But to measure it for the period where the variability is the most, either with I think it's weekly. So every water measuring point shall be measured weekly, or by automated water level measurer, as we use. It's probably more realistic to do it that way. And then you just go and collect the data from it's often called divers, from the automatic measurement units, and store them.
Okay.
I'm not sure if this was the question, or what was the question.
I think it was
exactly
like a general question. I think, yeah, part of the VVB assessment is to also like do this yearly, and it's done with projects in other sectors as well. So I think you probably covered as much as you could with such a general question. We do have another question. It's a little bit longer. So I would like to maybe ask Ranvik if you can cover, maybe because it's a very long text.
Yes,
So maybe you can just like take the bits and be answering like
yes,
questions and
so
areas.
I think that it's a long question, yes, and I think Sinna has, I think, answered like quite well with the relation to the water table measurement and the CO2 emission. But at the end of this question, it says, that using correlation between water level depth and CO2 emission, a globally robust relationship in peatland, as indicated in figure 1 in the methodology, cannot be applied in Iceland without a better research base. In such validation planned in the near future. So basically, the question is, will there be more research like Iceland-based, to make this relationship even more robust?
Yes, I am trying to read it. I don't fully understand it. We are addressing, or we are the idea is to use like the water level and CO2 emission correlation factor, not necessarily linear, just what is best for each place. Here in Iceland, we have been measuring this for quite a while, and we have quite a good database of these measurements. And we have a paper in preparation where we are going to publish this data from Iceland. So we are not taking we are not using data from another country for our correlation factors, as is explained in the methodology.
Okay, great. I think you covered most of the areas that the question was asking. Of course, the person who submitted this question is welcome to submit it as a comment in the public consultation, so we can, the developer, Land and Forest, can have the time to prepare the answer and so on. So
yeah, I think I understand. It's about like you using, for example, equation derived from research in maybe peatlands in the middle of Europe to Iceland. That's not the idea. We are making our own equation representing conditions in Iceland. And that's the thought. And
okay, great. So I hope this question came anonymously, so the person who submitted, I hope this is clear. Otherwise, like I said, you're welcome to submit it as a comment on the methodology, and that the comment will be answered. But we do have more questions One has to do with German wetlands. So the question says, is it possible to compare German wetlands to Icelandic? And are there any scientific research papers on this?
You can of course compare, but they are not the same, and we don't have no scientific paper on that. And we are not going to use. It was only to show how strong this relationship is. So it's been calculated for Germany, it's been calculated in Denmark, and we are calculating it for Iceland.
Mm-hmm.
Not like it's. We are not saying the relationship is the same everywhere. Not at all.
Mm-hmm.
It's country specific, latitude specific, specific for conditions everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And of course we are an island in the mid-Atlantic with much colder, with shorter summers and everything. So it's not the same, of course not. But it's a similar trend. It's not the same, but it's a similar trend.
Yeah, and if I remember correctly, previously there was a methodology for peatland that was developed in Germany. So maybe this is also where this is coming from. We are happy to hear comments from Germany and hear if there are methodologies being developed or if there are projects interested in registering. It would be great to hear from you during the public consultation. But to move on, regarding the process of registering a project, Ingi Björk is asking, we take the measurements weekly. I assume she refers to the forestry projects. How often would VVB verify the measurements? Yearly, or is that a decision made by the developer? And she says, thank you for a great meeting.
I can take this and maybe also Sunna, but usually the way it goes is the VVB, they have maybe their idea on how often they think they need to double check data. But also when a project proponent is using the methodology, the project proponent must develop a monitoring plan. And often during that period, it needs to be very clear how often the project proponent wants things to be verified or validated. And from there, there is also an additional decision from the VVB. They say, okay, yes, we believe that it is enough to come yearly or like or every 5 years. That would, of course, not be the case with this project since it is producing like avoidance or reduction credits, which are like when they become true, they are actually active. So that would be needed to be checked more often. That, like, for example, if you have to wait for a forest to grow, or if you have to wait for a carbon that is sequestered within the soil environment to be measurable. That doesn't happen that often. So then one can decide that it only needs to be checked every 10 years or whatever. So it's very project dependent, and this is a decision made by the project proponent, but then it gets approval from a VVB if this is considered to be realistic.
I hope that answers your question. Otherwise, you can continue submitting in the... Yeah, so I see this answer your question. So she said perfect. Okay. But yes, we are reaching the end of our webinar. These are all the questions that we have received. I will also just ask Sunna, Bryndís, or Rannveig if there is anything that you would like to add, something we didn't mention, something coming up, anything that we would like to cover at the end.
Well, I just wanted to encourage everyone to read the methodology after this webinar for those who have not yet and wanted just to get like the feel and the introduction now. And then just to stress the fact that, you know, the comments from everyone are extremely important to make this a strong methodology. And this is also why Jolanda and Skógur and Sunna and Bryndís, they decided to go this way to get the public consultation ahead of the validation verification from a VVB project to make the methodology even stronger before it is handed to a VVB. And then the VVB can also see the comments that were made by the public or by the stakeholders before it went through the validation verification process. So we strongly encourage you to do so. And this is the idea behind the webinar and doing this now.
Okay, so if there are no more questions, then we would like to finalize the webinar today. Thank you so much to everyone who attended, to our speakers, and we look forward to hearing your comments. And please follow up the next developments of this methodology and the projects that will come with it. Okay, thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.